Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It makes it really hard and dangerous for me to leave my walker.
Ice, snow, and a slow go. Very cold winter weather sweeps across the south coast, and more is on the way.
Any new homes, first of all, that have never been frozen before always encounter, some difficulties.
And those frigid temperatures can mean big trouble for pipes. What you can do to avoid a costly repair. And she's known as the stubborn baker, who will not let a disability get in the way of her dreams.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Anita is on assignment this week. Much of BC is slowed down by ice, cold, and snow, and more flurries are in the forecast. This was Highway 1 this morning, snarled by gridlock after the second major snowstorm of the season blew through the province yesterday. BC Hydro crews have been out in full force dealing with outages caused by cable failures and car crashes, but there is more to come. Environment Canada has issued a snowfall warning for the lower mainland. Up to 10 to 15 centimetres is expected to fall between tonight and tomorrow. It's already started. BC's Transportation Ministry has all but told people without winter tires to stay off the roads. And road salt has become a hot commodity, with some people taking matters into their own hands.
The main roads are fine, like 16th and Burrard and Arbutus, all good. But the residential streets are not plowed, and so they're touch and go.
Not everyone was struggling with slippery surfaces today. On the first winter break for schools, children and their families scoped out the best hills armed with sleds and toboggans and crazy carpets. Parts of the island also experienced below average temperatures, causing scenes like this in Victoria, where much of the legislature fountain was frozen solid. And in Nanaimo, scenes of snowy serenity amid the delays elsewhere. But winter weather is here to stay for now, affecting some British Columbians' ability to travel, work, or stay safe and warm. And as Lindsay Duncombe tells us, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
The rituals of winter are unfamiliar here.
Well, -9 right now. We're not used to this cold weather at this time. Actually, at any time.
Daniel Ching would usually spend the day outside collecting bottles. Instead, he's crowded in a warming center with other people who don't have anywhere else to go.
Today, I didn't even leave the shelter. It's too cold.
He's struggling.
Drivers are unpracticed in snow.
Oh my God, good thing we pulled off.
This is what Highway 1 looked like on this morning's commute. Icy gridlock. This afternoon, a blunt message from the province. If you don't have winter tires, and many don't, stay off the roads. Ice and snow are slowing down planes, too. As the delays pile up, the waits get longer. This Whistler bike mechanic is headed to Dublin to see his sick grandma. He'll be late.
About a day. Yeah, there's not too much, so I'll get there.
Getting anywhere is tough if you're on foot, using a walker.
The ice is built up there, and it makes it really hard and dangerous for me.
Valerie Longjohn moved to Vancouver from Saskatoon to get away from weather like this.
2 weeks ago, I phoned my daughter-in-law, and she said it was -41, and they had so much snow that her husband couldn't shovel all the snow away.
So it could be worse.
Oh yeah, a lot worse.
Bad news, though. Worse is coming.
And we're going to get some heavy snowfall through places like Victoria, Vancouver, Fraser Valley, and the Coquihalla as well. So, there's going to be quite a bit of snow from tonight into tomorrow morning.
So there is the potential for another messy, if not outright dangerous, commute tomorrow morning. Remember, it was just a couple of weeks ago when the snow hit, just as people were driving home. And in that case, some people spent 12 hours in their cars. So having just gone through that, there's some anxiety about what the next day or so could bring. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
The extreme cold is putting strain on homes and public infrastructure. A state of emergency has been declared in Prince Rupert after water mains froze there. And as John Hernandez reports, plumbers are seeing a big surge in calls province-wide.
We're not really built for sub-zero temperatures.
The extreme cold took a quick and heavy toll in Prince Rupert. Water mains below the streets froze and then burst. A state of emergency declared Saturday, still in effect.
When we declared the state of emergency, we already had a number of breaks just in the week that had led up to that Saturday. We've had 3 more since.
Pipes underground, aging and unable to withstand the current cold snap.
The one pipe that we pulled out of the ground just last night, I believe, was 106 years old, and it basically crumbling in people's hands as they're pulling it out.
As extreme cold and snowfall warnings blanket much of the province through the week, a sudden surge in calls to plumbers and restoration crews.
Always the first really cold snap in every city is very busy for us, because what happens is that any new homes, first of all, that have never been frozen before always encounter, some difficulties. As well, homes that have been renovated over the summer.
One of the biggest complaints is, just heating systems that have not been maintained, failing, or we have issues where some of the houses are not properly insulated and the water lines freeze.
This Metro Vancouver plumbing company is so busy it's had to turn down jobs.
Unfortunately, we have had to turn away. We prioritize people that have worked with us before, and we also have an ear out for the situation. We try to take care of the elderly.
So how can you avoid costly repairs at this time of year?
When there's a cold snap, turn your thermostat up a degree or 2, and that'll help offset some of the freezing issues.
If you've ever noticed on a really cold day that you turn on the tap and nothing happens, or that the water comes out really, really slowly, that's a dead giveaway that you've got some sort of freezing issue with your plumbing, and you need to call a plumber and get it looked at right away.
A call that, if made early enough, can save you a lot of stress. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you are traveling during the holidays, BC Ferries is asking passengers to pack some patience aboard if they plan to travel. It's put on 151 extra sailings on its busiest routes, but a smaller one is out of commission right now. The sailing between Vesuvius on Salt Spring Island and Crofton on Vancouver Island has been scrubbed after the motor and throttle on the rescue boat of the ferry froze in the cold.
We did have an issue with the rescue boat on startup this morning. So unfortunately, we have had to temporarily suspend service until we can get that rescue boat fixed. It is a piece of safety equipment that we must have working in proper order in order to be able to sail.
Ferries did set up a free water taxi to get people between the terminals, and customers can travel between Fulford Harbour on Salt Spring and Swartz Bay. Ferries expects 780,000 passengers to sail with them over the 10 days of the holidays. And as the cold weather persists, advocates in Cranbrook say more support for people without homes is pivotal. A temporary shelter is running out of the Travelodge Hotel there, but as the CBC's Corey Bullock reports, despite early arrivals, residents are not guaranteed a bed.
It's really stressful trying to make sure that you're there at 4 and getting anything else that you need to do done during the day. There should be definitely more shelter support for sure.
With only 8 drop-in beds at the temporary shelter in Cranbrook, many are left to sleep in the cold.
We have seen crazy amounts of frostbite from our people who are living out in the cold, and people are losing fingers and toes because of this right now.
Polly Sutherland is the team lead with Anchors East Kootenay, which supports the homeless population.
People with substance use disorder and that are extremely vulnerable don't have they don't have the tools right now in their toolbox to be able just to pull up their socks, get a job, and do something about that. They need us to support them.
Add to the lack of shelter a toxic drug supply and freezing temperatures. Advocates say the combination is leaving people incapacitated, sometimes for days, and potentially impeding their recovery.
We're seeing a lot of people nodding out, or basically completely losing consciousness for long periods of time. They're losing sometimes a day to 2 days where they just don't remember what's gone on just because of how much of this benzodiazepine is present.
Polly Sutherland of Anchors says that for now, the Baptist Church in Cranbrook will be opening its doors to the unhoused starting tomorrow night. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
Time for our first look at the BC-wide weather forecast. Johanna's taking the day off, so meteorologist John Sauter is here John, it's downright cold, what we're not used to here on the South Coast, and it's hitting all sorts of places across our big province.
Yeah, it sure is, Dan. You know, I've got some records behind me, and this is just a sample of what was happening on Sunday across BC. And we start in Prince Rupert, Bella Bella, Campbell River, all around -12, breaking these older records. But you go farther north into the Yukon, and we see a number that is absolutely scary, -45.3 in Faro. And then this one, Puncy Mountain, has got some elevation, but -38 on Sunday. So very colorful weather alert map. We've got everything from winter storm warnings to Arctic outflow warnings, extreme cold warnings, even snowfall warnings in certain parts of the province. And this extends well to the north and into Alberta. And it is going to last thanks to this big trough of low pressure right through into Thursday. The cold air stays, but a glimmer of hope would be that by the time we get into the weekend, there is warmer weather on the way into southern parts of BC and Alberta. In a few minutes, I'll talk about some snow that's on the way for tonight. That's coming up.
Okay, thanks very much, John.
You bet.
The search for a hiker missing from the U.S. missing on Vancouver Island has now been called off. Melissa McDevitt was last heard from on December 8th after she didn't show up for a flight home. RCMP released surveillance footage of McDevitt walking on a trail on December 9th. Her vehicle was found near the Souk Potholes Provincial Park on December 10th. Mounties and the Juan de Fuca Search and Rescue suspended their search after one of the largest searches in the province ever.
Despite the effort, the terrain is very difficult. It would be very easy for Melissa to be missed. We certainly were as thorough as we could possibly be, but knew that locating her was going to be a challenge, particularly given that we knew she was likely unresponsive. It's always devastating to searchers when we're not able to locate someone.
Over the weekend, 17 teams from around the province showed up with 170 searchers and canines. Crews say heavy snowfall over the weekend did not impact their search. To other news now. A man who admitted to stabbing 3 family members to death before setting their house on fire has been sentenced to life in prison. Kia Ibrahimian will not be allowed to apply for parole for at least 15 years. Earlier this fall, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the killings of his brother Befrin Ibrahimian, mother Tatiana Baziar, and their partner Francesco Zengrilli in Langley in June of 2020. Firefighters found their bodies inside the house after they put out the blaze. Second-degree murder carries with it an automatic life sentence. The BC government says the number of surgeries being performed now is higher than ever, and almost all operations postponed because of the pandemic have now been completed. Non-urgent surgeries were postponed at the start of the pandemic to make room for COVID patients. But as new surges and waves hit, they again were paused. BC's health minister says nearly all patients who still wanted surgery after pandemic delays have now had them.
We postponed surgeries in the tens of thousands because of the actions taken when COVID-19 was declared a public health emergency. That the wait lists in BC, of course, grew as a result of that, with actually postponed surgeries and then surgeries that would have happened in April and May of 2020 and did not happen.
Dick says BC is in for a record year of surgeries, saying there have been 4% more in BC during the first half of the fiscal year compared to the same period in 2019. Well, many in BC are adjusting to using or being offered reusable bags instead of plastic. There are concerns that swap isn't exactly a solution. Walmart Canada dropped plastic bags months ago, deciding to offer reusable totes for you to buy or free for customers ordering pickup or delivery. As Sophia Harris reports, some people now have hundreds of reusable bags, far more than they can use.
Larry Grant applauds the ban on plastic bags, but says this is not a smart alternative. Grant gets weekly grocery pickup from Walmart, where the plastic bags were nixed in April. Now, each order arrives in new reusable bags. So far totaling about 300.
Are you able to reuse all of these?
No, I can't. I'm really frustrated. I just hope they will think about this failure, I would say, and come up with a solution.
We get like 10 to 15 of them every single week.
Natalie and Udi Selig at Walmart grocery delivery. They too are overwhelmed.
We can't return them. We can't really do much with them. This is something that, it's supposed to resolve an environmental issue, but at the same time, it actually creates more waste.
It's the right thing to do.
Walmart says its plastic bag ban is a win for the environment. But experts say this is a problem because reusable bags aren't always worthwhile.
Because of the types of materials that you use and the manufacturing process that you use to make a more durable reusable bag, you're just ending up using more energy. The environmental benefits are accrued when you use it again and again.
A recent United Nations study found a polypropylene bag needs to be used 10 to 20 times, a cotton one up to 150 times, to have a less harmful impact on the environment than a single-use plastic bag.
Just making that switch from single-use to reusable isn't always going to just end up better for the environment.
With the federal government phasing out all single-use plastic shopping bags in Canada, we could see a lot more of these, especially as grocery delivery grows in popularity. Grocer Metro says it has a solution. Customers can get their groceries delivered in a reusable plastic bin.
It's never ending, look at that.
But some Walmart customers are still waiting for an end to this. The company says it's exploring alternatives. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
It is the end of an era for one of an iconic beer haven in Vancouver. After 16 years, the family-run Alibi Room in Gastown is changing ownership this week. Peggy Lamb paid them a visit before the owners poured their final pint.
This brass neck beer? Don't do anything I wouldn't do.
Owner Nigel Springthorpe is passing on the torch. His family ran the Alibi Room for 16 years. But recently, his brother-in-law, who's also the head chef, was diagnosed with a rare cancer.
It's definitely bittersweet. I didn't leave the Alibi Room by choice. We had a family situation. Greg was diagnosed with chordoma just over a year ago, and so he was on a ventilator for almost 3.5 months and had a huge change.
Springthorpe was left running the restaurant with just his wife, and things got really stressful, so they decided to sell.
We're passing it on to someone who cares, to leave the place in good hands, to walk away from something with our heads held high. And that was important to us.
The Alibi Room was one of the first places in Vancouver to start craft beer tastings. Springthorpe says he used to drive around in BC, bringing back kegs for customers to try. Now they have 50 beers on tap.
Back in 2008, it was a pretty important thing for a brewer to have one of their beers put on tap at the Alibi Room. It was like a sign that you'd reached a certain achievement. To get Nigel's approval.
Come January, the restaurant will be run by a Victoria-based company called Floor Top. The new operators say they'll add some new menu items, but will keep the same crew.
We just want to kind of keep running with it as it is and just shore things up a little bit and make it a great place to come and hang out.
Springthorpe says he'll miss the restaurant and the building with its charm, character, and quirks, like this wall next to table 11.
One of them will come in one day and leave a note back there, and then someone else, can I get table 11? And then they'll come and sit, and then they'll pull it out and see what the note they've got written for them.
But with so many great staff members and regulars over the years, he says it's them he'll miss the most. Peggy Lamb, CBC News, Vancouver.
'Tis the season for families and friends and colleagues and associates to get together and celebrate this holiday season. As we know, though, that can be stressful for a lot of people for various reasons. The weather, travel, family dynamics, not to mention food and drink. So how do you keep a healthy, level holiday ahead? Dr. Melissa Lem is here to tell us. She's a family physician and assistant clinical professor at UBC. Thanks for being with us, Doctor. Let's start with food and with drink. We know those can be stressors. There's lots of things laid out, people encouraging others to imbibe. What are the issues you see there, first of all?
Well, let's start with drink. So with alcohol, I think it's really important to know what the safe drinking guidelines are. So Health Canada says that women should have no more than 10 drinks per week and no more than 3 at one sitting on a special occasion. And men should have no more than 15 in 1 week and no more than 4 at one sitting. And when you are drinking, to avoid that hangover the next day, you want to make sure you have at least 1 glass of water per standard drink to make sure you don't get dehydrated. But something interesting is that the Canadian Centre on Addictions and Substance Use in the summer put out new guidelines saying that people should have no more than 2 drinks per week, which is interesting because in fact it can increase your risk of several kinds of cancer once you go over the 2 mark. So for some people, in fact, not drinking at all may be better, but in general, the take-home message is less is better.
And that's certainly a pressure that people feel, perhaps if they're thinking to indulge, et cetera. And that also goes along, as we mentioned, with food. What about that?
That's right. So whether it's shortbread or sausage-filled stuffing, there's so many different options to indulge over the holidays. So I think what we need to remember is that healthy eating starts at home before that party or before that dinner starts. So if you want to make sure that you don't get tempted to indulge more when you're out, just load up on something healthy at home before you go. If it's a potluck, bring a healthy dish. And then when you're actually at the party or at the dinner, if it's at your own house, remember Health Canada's rules again. So something called Healthy Plate says that half your diet should be fruits and vegetables, 1/4 whole grains, and 1/4 protein. So go for those veggies and fruits first. You'll fill yourself up with healthy stuff and leave less room for the unhealthy stuff.
And we know we've heard people say take a smaller plate, because sometimes that does help rather than loading up all at once. What about, as we mentioned, some of the family dynamics, pressure, whether perhaps there's grievances or mental stress? How should people cope with that?
One thing we have to remember is when you're surrounded by this holiday madness, get back to basics. So you want to make sure you're eating healthy, like I mentioned. You want to make sure that you prioritize sleep, get that 7 to 9 hours a night, and then exercise regularly. And something else I think we have to keep in mind is that family and friends might not be comfortable with indoor gatherings right now because of COVID. There are lots of people in the community who have certain health conditions that make it more risky for them if they were to catch COVID. So maybe do something alternative, an indoor, well-ventilated gathering with masks on. Or remember, you can go outside too. Remember, early in the pandemic, we said outside is better than inside. So go for a nature walk, hang out in the park, because we know nature is also a natural stress reliever.
That segues into our last question. You just came back from COP15, United Nations, a biodiversity conference in Montreal, and you're involved with a group that got quite an endorsement. Tell us about that.
That's right. Thanks for asking, Dan. So, something historic happened today. We came to the first massive international agreement on conserving nature. So conserving 30% of biodiverse lands and waters by 2030. But as you mentioned, I'm director of park prescriptions, in fact, for the BC Parks Foundation, in addition to my day job as a family doctor. And we announced that the Canadian Medical Association formally endorsed our program and enshrined it into policy. They're recommending that medical students learn how to prescribe nature and doctors prescribe nature too. So I'm really happy about the agreement and also happy about that announcement.
And how long do you think it will take to have this practically in effect, where doctors say, I'm going to write you this, and we recommend, suggest, if not, push you to go out and get into nature?
What's interesting, Dan, is 15% of doctors in BC have already signed up for this program. And across Canada, it's over 5%. So I think we're well on our way to mainstreaming this idea that nature is essential for our health into medical practice.
We appreciate all the advice. Dr. Melissa Lim, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, you too, Dan.
It's a sweet story of resilience with deep ties to this Christmas season. After the break, we'll tell you the story of the so-called stubborn baker, who has some tips for icing your holiday goodies. Stick around. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. In the face of public anxiety during this pandemic, an Edmonton sculptor hid some of his art in the river valley of that city and invited people to hunt for it. That inspired a movement called Radical Generosity, which uncovers the good work happening in that community.
We were coming up with items for silent auction and came across an individual, Slavo, who does sculptures around the city. And just kind of the stories that kind of came back were absolutely amazing. He noticed people being tired of being cooped up in their homes, so he came up with an idea about taking one of his sculptures and hiding it in the river valley.
I was kind of sensing there was a real anxiety in the air here in the city, and people were unsure of how to navigate the lockdowns. I wanted to come up with a fun way to get people outside and involved in a safe way, so I came up with this concept of the art hunt. Literally thousands of people showed up to look for these things.
People would go out with their families and they'd come back and people would find them, obviously, but then they'd also say, this was such an amazing experience. It's not all doom and gloom. There is a light. Philanthropy is not just a rich person giving lots of money to a cause. It's people doing whatever they can to help others. Radical generosity, because it is radical. It's different. This is not a campaign. This is, as far as we're concerned, this is a movement. This is something to point out to others that there is goodness around us. It's not all bad. I think people want to know that there's hope. Radical generosity is that. It shows that we still have hope for humanity, for people to step up. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, it just has to be a small thing, but that it's important to someone else.
It's an important way to give back to the community that's supported me through this pandemic, and I think it's important to give back when you can.
Time to dive into the CBC Creator Network now. Jessica Kruger is the Stubborn Baker, a Vancouver business that makes custom cakes and cookies. As Kruger explains, the name comes from refusing to let a disability stop her from achieving her dreams.
I think probably the first time I was aware of how much I loved baking and the joy that it brought to me was probably making gingerbread houses at Christmas with my mom and sister. My grandma used to make mint and Nanaimo bars, and those were definitely my favorite. I would sneak into the fridge and steal some at night when everybody else had gone to bed. I loved them so much. It was my grandma and my mom that introduced me to baking and sort of made me fall in love with it for the first time. I own a custom dessert business called The Stubborn Baker. Everything from cakes to cookies, cupcakes, all the treats for special events. The Stubborn Baker was named as a reflection of some of the challenges I faced being somebody that uses a wheelchair, starting a small business. But when I was 15, I got my first summer job as a house painter. 2 stories up, no harness, and then working for 5 minutes when suddenly I felt faint and I knew what was about to happen. I tried to hang my body over the ladder in the second that I had, and obviously that didn't do anything. I had broken my neck in 4 places. Before that happened, I was super active. I played basketball, softball, volleyball. Every single thing that I had known about life was turned upside down, and I had to figure out how to do everything in a brand new way. Ever since I had my accident, people have referred to me as stubborn, and I take it as a compliment. One of the things that I turned back to in many ways was baking, and for many years it was a hobby that I did for friends and family. I started kind of getting invested in the decorating side of things. I eventually sort of saw what was right in front of me the whole time and started to look for pastry schools at that point, and then, started to chase the dream. I started looking into the different schools in the area and applied to one that I had been to previously, so I knew the space was wheelchair accessible, and they just said they weren't willing to accommodate me. And then a different school I applied to take a few one-off classes, they said that I would have to pay for 2 spots because I was going to take up double the room. Third one I went and spoke with was VCC, Vancouver Community College. Totally different experience than the first 2, and a huge relief for me, for sure. And yeah, it ended up working out great there. That's stubbornness, Can't take no for an answer. Being in a wheelchair, kind of the only option is to become a problem solver, because literally every time I leave the house in the morning, I know that I'm going to be faced with some sort of challenge that I'm going to have to figure out. Finally accepting like that this was my reality and I was somebody that used a chair, and embracing that it was cool to be a part of that community. So in 2019, I had finished pastry school and decided to start my business, The Stubborn Baker. I moved into a commissary kitchen, so it's a shared commercial kitchen space, and was able to, legitimately start everything there. And so 3 years later, we're still going strong. Recently, I had the opportunity to do some cookies for Arc'teryx, and then I got to actually go to one of their events and hand the cookies out, and just to see the excitement of oh my God, I have that jacket, and people wanting to grab the cookie that matched their jacket. And I feel for the most part, I miss out on that. I don't often get to see in the moment the reaction to what I've created for the person it was meant for. If there's anything I ever want people to take from my journey, it's that there will always be people that tell you you can't do something or you're not capable of it. But at the end of the day, you're the only one that gets to decide what you can or can't do. So I think I'm definitely learning how to be stubborn in the moments when I need to be, but give myself that little bit of grace in the moments when I need a little bit of a break and take a step back from the stubbornness. It's hard though. The reason I love baking is because it allows me to create something that brings joy to other people. So we're going to create this really fun spiraled icing on a cupcake. You're gonna lay out a piece of plastic wrap, and you're gonna create a strip of icing in each color. So once you have your icings all set up in that plastic wrap, you're ready to pop it into your piping bag, pipe it onto your cupcake in that beautiful spiral, and your cupcakes are ready for your next holiday party. This tip works great for cupcakes, but it's also great for borders on cakes as well. Wishing you a very happy holidays from The Stubborn Baker.
Coming up, a congressional committee looking into last year's violent U.S. Capitol insurrection recommends former President Trump be charged criminally. That's next.
Question mark.
10-year-old Nicoyo Fitzpatrick is another homeschooler. He's been out of public school for a year and a half. Nicoyo's last class had 42 students, and he doesn't miss it.
In school, you all have to do the same thing, even if you're at a higher or lower level. And when you're doing home education, you can go at your level.
So change it to a quarter note.
Nicoyo's father, Sands, has a degree in mathematics and a teaching certificate. Joanne Harrington also has a university degree. But you don't need special qualifications to teach at home. Parents can legally do the job themselves as long as they give their children an adequate education.
When you pull this up, that comes up and lets the water through.
British Columbia has more homeschoolers than the rest of the country combined, about 2,200. Many found out about home education through Tunya Odan. Odan is a taxi driver with a teaching certificate. She's also founder of the Education Advisory Service. Odan promotes home education. She says BC leads the country because more people are aware of homeschooling, because of a West Coast zeal for independence, and because of conflict.
BC has a very volatile educational scene. It's very confrontational, it's very frustrating, it's very difficult. There's been reports which say people are very concerned about the increasing mediocrity in the school system, the deterioration of the system. Whether it's so or not, that's the feeling. It's a very strong perception. And so people are just looking around for alternative.
Many educators are concerned about homeschooling as an alternative. They're afraid the kids miss out, that public school can teach them more about living and working with people who are different than they are.
Often the parents of children who want to educate their own children are highly motivated, will put a tremendous amount of energy into doing that and are very successful. If they want to make that contribution, and we're prepared to do it in addition to and on top of what the school institution can offer, the child would be yet far better off.
Oh, yeah.
Go back to note 67.
Nikoyo's and Claire's parents were concerned their kids would lose out, but they've gotten around that. Their kids play with friends after school. Joanne has signed Claire up for programs like Brownies, and after a few weeks of teaching at home, she's optimistic.
I haven't managed to juggle the things that I used to do before she was home with me all day with the role of being a teacher, and that's my biggest problem, and I think once I get that organized, things will go smoother. But she's very happy at home, and our days are busy doing things.
Joanne Harrington is simply more involved with her daughter's education. For Tunya Odan, that's the key.
Parents have got to start being a lot more influential, and they have to count in their children's lives and not be just left to the experts in the schools. And we don't know what's going on in the schools. We don't know if there's damage or otherwise, and parents have to be a lot more involved.
The COP15 summit in Montreal wrapped up today with leaders coming to an agreement on global conservation targets for 2030. The New Deal aims to protect 30% of the world's land and oceans by the end of the decade. Jayla Bernstein has more.
This is a landmark deal. It's a plan that's supposed to help humanity pivot away from harmful practices that are unsustainable when it comes to nature. And yes, some politicians and ministers on the ground here at the summit have said it could be more ambitious, more aggressive. It could have tougher measures when it comes to making sure that all of the goals are implemented. But generally today, the day that the framework was finally adopted, the feeling on the ground is mostly one of relief.
After this agreement, I don't know you, but I feel much more comfortable and proud to look in. I am a through this agreement, we can build a better future for all our children and grandchildren.
There are 23 targets in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and they range from everything including protecting 30% of the Earth's land and oceans to stopping human-caused species extinction and pledging money to help support conservation efforts in developing countries. Canada actually announced $531 million in new funding during COP15 for protecting nature in developing countries. But still, this agreement is just that, a plan forward. There's still a mountain of work ahead if countries want to actually turn all of this text into action. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
To the U.S. now, where the investigation into the January 6th attack on the Capitol has wrapped up with an unprecedented move. Sketty Simpson tells us lawmakers now recommend criminal charges against former President Donald Trump and several others close to him.
The weight of history heavy upon their shoulders. Lawmakers investigating the January 6th attack took the kind of action they hope will bring severe consequences and serve as a deterrent.
Ours is not a system of justice where foot soldiers go to jail and the masterminds and ringleaders get a free pass.
The committee voted unanimously to urge the Department of Justice to charge Donald Trump with 4 crimes: obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make a false statement, and inciting or assisting an insurrection.
This was an utter moral failure and a clear dereliction of duty. No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again.
The committee also made criminal referrals against one of Trump's lawyers, John Eastman, and other allies still to be named publicly. And it referred 4 Republican members of Congress, including Kevin McCarthy, who is poised to become House Speaker, to the Ethics Committee for ignoring subpoenas.
If we are to survive as a nation of laws and democracy, this can never happen again.
As significant as this moment is, it's largely symbolic. The recommendations are simply suggestions.
Now it's up to the Department of Justice to make a decision as to whether or not they can be successful in prosecuting the case.
This former U.S. Attorney General says prosecutors have to be cautious, given the explosive political sensitivities of this case.
What are you expecting to happen next?
They're probably going to issue subpoenas for more information. And then after gathering up the additional information, then perhaps down the road, we're going to see possible indictments and then moving forward with a possible criminal trial. And sometimes, the wheels of justice grind slowly.
Katie Simpson reporting. Ukrainians are adjusting to their first Christmas in Canada thanks to a traditional holiday market in New Westminster. That story's coming up. And at 6:39, a live look at Cypress Mountain. Lots of snow for boarders and riders, but we're bracing for more snow here in the Lower Mainland on top of what we've already got. Meteorologist John Sauter will have your BC-wide weather forecast right after this.
Does Ottawa have fashion? I'd like to say Ottawa does have fashion, and not just in the most distinctive way where you come to Ottawa and you pick out that, okay, this is Ottawa's fashion language, or this is what defines Ottawa.
Everyone has their own sense of style, and what I love about Ottawa is that it's so diverse that you can't really put an etiquette to it. You can't really name it because everybody's so different, and that's what's beautiful and that's what makes us unique.
Because I look at fashion now as a uniform that represents a certain culture. It's whatever you're wearing defines to a certain level who you are or what you represent or what you support or what you believe in. So I believe now that, fashion is a way that I've been given the opportunity to, dive into the community aspect of things and, support the community and fund community events. Hi, my name is Christopher Afalabi, and I'm the creative director of Severe Nature. I think the biggest issue is really support for these youth system and these creative systems in Ottawa. It's like there's no sustainability for that aspect of the city, constantly sustaining the youth creative community out here. There's not that much that's being put into that. So that part, I say, is very unique to Ottawa in terms of like the growth of fashion out here. The support system is not as dominant.
Hi, I'm Lydia Tespel-Michael, and I am the co-founder of Canada Fashion Network. As an organization, we are supporting entrepreneurship in the fashion industry by giving them confidence within their means of, okay, this is what I need to do moving forward. If I want to start something, I want to finish it. I want to make sure that I'm being heard and I have an opportunity to really try. And so supporting them by giving them a blueprint of how do you start a business, supporting them and making sure that they understand that they're not alone. As a community, we are all trying to figure it out.
Ukrainians who came to Canada seeking refuge from the war are preparing to mark their first Christmas here. The season brings mixed emotions as they think of family left behind. Dozens visited a traditional Ukrainian Christmas market yesterday in New Westminster, though. Janella Hamilton has more on the chance to discover new traditions.
From taking photos with St. Nicholas to traditional art and a market filled with Ukrainian artisans and vendors. 13-year-old Sofia Sakvuk says events like this are helping her family adjust to their first Christmas in Canada.
When I do the traditions I do in Ukraine, it feels like I'm home.
Sakvuk, along with her 2 siblings and father, moved to Canada a few months ago. Her mom, older brother, and grandparents are still in Ukraine. Christmas isn't the same without them, but she's grateful she's safe.
I hope it's going to be the same and it's going to be really comfortable with the family, singing Ukrainian carols.
Traditions Katerina Mala hopes to share with her daughter this Christmas when they celebrate on December 25th, a change from the traditional Julian calendar.
She has calendar on our fridge and she all day just count when will be Christmas.
On Sunday, that Christmas spirit filled the halls of Holy Eucharist Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral. Irina Mitnovich says hosting a traditional Ukrainian market is one way to help newcomers as they navigate their new lives in a new country.
Everybody said that they missed Ukraine, they miss their families, their homes, and maybe if it's any chance we can help them to feel home, like for a day. It will be great for us.
Money raised through the market will be donated to women and children in Ukraine.
Most important when kids can play and try to get some connection and friends, because change country and change language, it's very difficult for them.
Sakvuk says it's been hard being away from her friends back home, but it's meant a lot to her to feel that support from her new friends and classmates in BC.
Like Canadians, Asians, they all sing together our Christmas carol, our Ukrainian Christmas carol, and I started crying because it's really emotional.
Next weekend, the cathedral is hosting a traditional Ukrainian Christmas Eve dinner for the 700 Ukrainian newcomers who now call New Westminster home. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, New Westminster.
Our full and complete BC-wide weather forecast with meteorologist John Sauter. Again, John, as we said earlier in the broadcast, we're not used to this cold, at least on the South Coast, and all sorts of warnings and what did you say, a colorful map earlier?
Yeah, a colorful warning map with, I think there were about 5 or 6 different kinds of weather alerts all over British Columbia today. And boy, you look at some of these afternoon temperatures, and some of those alerts were for extreme cold and Arctic outflow. And that just really, the difference in those two is the speed at which it cools down. That's the Arctic outflow warning. But afternoon temperatures in the interior barely getting past -30 in Williams Lake and Prince George, a -7 this afternoon in Vancouver, not used to that. Areas in the far north that started the day at -40 never got past -30. Fort Nelson at -35 this afternoon, Dease Lake at -33. So satellite radar, this is all under very sunny conditions across most of the province. But here in the south, we're looking at some snow that is starting up, moving across into the mainland and Vancouver area, and some snow as well for Victoria. So there it is on Futurecast. Middle of the night, we'll be well involved in wet snow by the time we get into the morning. Still snowing in Vancouver, kind of moving out of Victoria at that point. And then on into the afternoon, we're going to see that snow letting up. Forecast snowfall amounts pretty staggering. Now, this is one forecast model, the graph model, that really puts down about 13 centimeters in Vancouver, 16 in Victoria. That's by 7 in the morning. Look at the amounts as we go through the end of the day. This might be a little overdone because I think some of this is going to melt on contact. Kelowna picking up 8 centimeters, but Vancouver, 22 centimeters. Shocking. As we look at temperatures tonight, still very, very cold, kind of a steady temperature around Vancouver, and then mid-30s, and there's that magic -40 number in Fort Nelson overnight tonight. Tomorrow, again, temperatures staying in the -30s farther north. Prince Rupert, a sunny high of -10, and we'll be back into brighter skies in the north, but staying with the cloud and, of course, the snow here in the south. -3 in Vancouver, -2 in Victoria. How long does it last? Well, the coldest weather will be Wednesday, Thursday. More snow by the end of the week, Thursday and Friday. Then we start to warm up. Saturday, Christmas Eve, a high of 6 with some rain. Christmas Day, a high of 8 and still raining.
Let's hope some of that snow does melt, as you say, John. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
It's a time-honored tradition for many families. Up next, we'll take you to Trinity Tree Farms, where families in and around Kelowna can be seen thumbing through those perfectly green Christmas trees. Stick around.
Wooden grain elevators like these in Kenniston are the skyscrapers of rural towns. At least they were. Two of the town's 3 skyscrapers are coming down, but they'll live on elsewhere. Inside this elevator rests outdated machinery and wood that's been worn into art. If you run your hand across it, you can feel the history.
And you can see the sculpting. If you look at the shape of that, you can see the natural grain sculpting.
The company ABMT Wood Solutions is looking to save most or all of the wood from these elevators. It's a delicate process, unlike the alternative. Alvin Herman's first project was tearing down this century-old elevator he owned in Milton, Saskatchewan. It was a liability, but he didn't want it to end up in the landfill.
I just found myself allergic to the demolition and burning and, polluting the environment. I thought there's real salvage there.
We're getting rid of it.
There are other owners like Herman, people who consider the elevators to be as much a part of their family's history as their hometowns.
We had a few family reunions here, and we would open up the elevator and go up the man lift, and all the kids thought that was pretty cool. And they would run over into the annex, open the windows, and you could look out over the town. It gave quite a view.
But holding on to the now obsolete elevators is a burden that's either passed down the family tree or to the town. They cost thousands annually to maintain and tens of thousands more to demolish.
It's one of the few communities in Saskatchewan with this kind of backdrop, and unfortunately it comes down to finances, and you can't change what's going to happen. Tomorrow's another day.
But ABMT recognizes the elevators are made with timber that is difficult to get your hands on. It's ideal for decorative work or construction. The massive pieces can be used for mezzanine or dance floors or new housing.
So this wall behind me, this is a nail laminated mass timber wall. So imagine the whole wall cut out, and then it's you add insulation to it. And then you have, let's say, 10 of those panels that are now used to reconstruct a home. So the house can be put up in panels, kind of like I guess like a Lego kit.
ABMT is working on a residential 3-bedroom show home with those panels now. It's quicker, affordable, cuts back on deforestation, and has a low carbon footprint. In the future, you may be standing or dancing on a wood floor that once reached for the sky. Dane Patterson, CBC News, Saskatoon.
It is a debate that feels as old as Christmas itself now. Do you get a real tree or a fake one? For customers of Trinity Tree Farms in Kelowna, that matter has been thoroughly decided. Have a look.
Here at Trinity Christmas Tree Farm, we sell Christmas trees. Local ones, most of them are from Enderby that we grow ourselves, the Douglas fir, and then we bring in the specialty trees as well, the Noble, Fraser, and Grand firs, also done by another local company.
We get one every year,
and we have to have a live tree. It smells right. It's a nostalgia factor, and so we since we discovered this lot a couple years ago, we've been coming here every year. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a tree. It's the right shape. Like, it's hard to find a tree here that's not a Christmas tree. So.
Well, thank you for coming early, and I'm glad everybody was able to hopefully get a tree, and looking forward to seeing everybody for next year. And hopefully we can get them out earlier so everybody gets exactly what they want.
All this month, we here at CBC British Columbia have been raising money for BC food banks, and those donations just keep on coming. Take a look. To date, you have donated more than $2.3 million. So big thank you to you. It's much appreciated. While our annual Food Bank Day is over, the memory remains. With some help from some special guests, we asked musicians to provide some festive music. Have a listen.
This Christmas, my dear, it's the best time of the year. This Christmas will cheer for Jingle Bell rockin', filling your stockings with joy. Couple toys. This Christmas, my dear, pack up the sleigh, Rudolph's leading the way from here. Have no fear. This Christmas, my dear, pum-pum-pum, little leg, now get rubbed by the fire. I'm getting tired. This Christmas, my dear, there'll be Happy New Year.
Saxophone makes things better. There you go. A reminder, it is not too late to donate to our food bank drive. You can visit foodbanksbc.com, and thank you for donating. Big demand this year for those services, so please help out as you can. Thanks for joining us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on Instagram, YouTube, and of course our website, cbc.ca/BC. Zara Premji will have your late local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night. Stay warm.